Okay, this is section 9.5, solving quadratic equations by using the quadratic formula. The formula x equals negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, first thing you have to do is you have to get the equation equal to 0. Alright, now plugging into the formula. Write the formula down every time. And then go to the side and identify your A is 1, your B is negative 12, and your C is 20. Plug this in, so that's negative and negative b, which is a positive b, plus or minus the square root of b squared. So we're going to square negative 12. The negative 12 is 144. Minus 4 times a times 20. All over 2 times a is 2 times 1 is 2. Okay. Now, you have to make sure you simplify in these steps. Copy down the 12 plus or minus the square root, bring down the 144, and then go and circle the negative 4ac part. This is where people make their mistake with the negatives. Negative 4 times 1 is a negative 4 times 20 is a negative 80. So we're going to subtract 80. That's x equals 12 plus or minus 144 minus 80 is 64 over 2. The square root of 64 is 8, so I'm going to separate this to 12 plus 8 over 2, and x is equal to 12 minus 8 over 2. Now, go into each fraction. 12 plus 8 is 20 over 2, which is 10. In the second fraction, 12 minus 8 is 4, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. And there are your two answers. Example 1b, you have to get it equal to 0. Now we're going to use the formula x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, where a is 2, b is 9, and c is negative 18. Okay, so x is equal to negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 81 minus 4 times 2 times a negative 18. So I'm going to put that in parentheses. All over 2 times 2 is 4, because a is 2. So now I'm going to recopy x equals negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 81. Now, go and circle the negative 4ac, the negative 4 times 2 times negative 18. You know that negative 4 times 2 is a negative 8, and 8 times 18 is 144, and negative times negative would make it a positive 144, all over 4. Now 144 from plus 81 is 225. So again, we're going to have to recopy the negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 225 all over 4. The square root of 225, okay, so I'm going to copy down x equals negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 225 is 15 over 4. Now, you can go ahead and separate. That would be easier to go ahead and separate it is negative 9 plus 15 over 4, and x is equal to negative 9 minus 15 over 4. So 15 minus 9, that's a positive 6 divided over 4. So x is 6/4, which reduces down to 3/2. And then negative 15 and a negative 9 is a negative 24 over 4, which is a negative 6. So there are your two answers. Number 2a, again, we're going to use the quadratic formula. It's already equal to 0, so we don't have to worry about that. A is 3, B is 5, and C is negative 12. So that's negative 5 plus or minus the square root b squared, that's 25, minus 4 times 3 times a negative 12. And again, I'm going to put the negative 12 in parentheses to show that I am multiplying, times a negative. And then 2 times 3 is 6, because a is 3. So again, I'm going to recopy the negative 5, the square root, 25. Now here's where you go and circle the negative 4 times 3 times a negative 12. And that would be a positive 144 all over 6. So again, we need to recopy the negative 5 plus 144 plus 25 is 169. And we could take the square root of 169 as 13. So that's negative 5 plus 13 over 6. And x is equal to negative 5 minus 13 over 6. So negative 5 plus 13 is a positive 8, and 8 over 6 reduces down to 4/3. And then x is equal to negative 5 and a negative 13 is a negative 18 over 6, which is a negative 3. So there are your two answers. Example 2b, we've got to get it equal to 0. Okay, again, use the quadratic formula. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And a is 10, b is negative 5, and c is negative 25. So that's x is equal to a negative 5 turns into a positive 5, plus or minus b squared, that's negative 5 squared, which is a positive 25, minus 4 times 10 times a negative 25, all over 2 times a. A is 10, so 2 times 10 is 20. So again, we recopy the 5 plus or minus 25. Go and now circle. That's negative 4 times 10 times a negative 25. Well, that's a negative 40 times a negative 25 turns into a positive 1,000 all over 20. Okay, so that's x is equal to 5 plus or minus the square root of 1,025 over 20. Now, square root of 1,025 is not a perfect square, so I'm going to take the square root of it and I'm going to round to the nearest tenth. So the square root of that is 32.015, and because if I round to the nearest tens, it'll say 32.0. In this case, I am going to round to the nearest hundreds. So that's 5 plus 32.01 over 20, and x is equal to 5 minus 32.01 over 20. Now using your calculator, 5 plus 32.01, hit equals, then divide by 20. And again, you can round that to the nearest tenths. And I get 1.9. And then 5 minus 32.01 equals divided by 20. And I get negative 1.4. Okay, here's a number 6 that is, forget that, I'm going to erase that because I already did number 6 in class. Okay, here's number 7 that's on the worksheet. I was trying to get one that doesn't have a perfect square root for you. So A is 2, B is 10, and C is a negative 5. So that's x is equal to negative 10 plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 100, minus 4 times 2 times c is a negative 5. All over 2 times 2 is 4. So x is equal to negative 10 plus or minus the square root of 100. We just have to recopy that. Now, let's go and multiply. We're going to circle the negative 4 times 2 times a negative 5. That's a negative 8 times a negative 5 is a positive 40, so that's plus 40. Be very careful. That's where your people mess up with their negative signs. Over 4. So that's x is equal to negative 10 plus or minus square root of 140 over 4. Now, we cannot take the square root of 140. 140 is not a perfect square root, so we get our calculator. It's 11.83215. I'm going to round that to the nearest tenth and just say 11.8. So I'm going to separate it to negative 10 plus 11.8 over 4, and x is equal to negative 10 minus 11.8 over 4. So negative 10 plus 11.8 is a positive 1.8 divided by 4 is 0.45. Now, because it's a terminating decimal, I am going to go ahead and leave that. I'm not going to round to 0.5. It stops, so it terminates, so I'm going to leave it. And then negative 10 and a negative 11.8 is negative 21.8 divided by 4 gives you a negative 5.45. And again, because it's a terminating decimal, I'm going to leave it. I'm not going to round that. Okay, very good. Good luck on your homework. Thank you.